Good morning, friends. Happy Friday. This is Lindsay Cross, Government Relations Director with Florida Conservation Voters. I hope that you're having a great morning so far. Here I have the opportunity to give you all an update on the MCOREs on the toll roads process. Again, hope that you all are doing well, that you're staying safe and healthy. If you have children that have started school, hopefully that is going well, and that you have some opportunity to decompress a little bit this weekend, maybe get outside in some places in wild and natural Florida. So Florida conservation voters, along with conservation voters around the state and some of our allies in the No Roads to Ruin coalition, are continuing to work to protect the natural resources that we treasure so much here in the state of Florida, which is why we have been adamantly engaged in this fight against the disastrous toll roads, the MCORE's process. We just celebrated an anniversary of sorts yesterday. August 27th was the 1 year, anniversary of the first toll roads task force meeting, a joint task force meeting that was held in Tampa. That was widely attended by people from throughout the community, as well as, of course, task force members for all three of the MCORE's processes. So since then, there has been many hours, countless hours that you and I and people across the state have devoted to this, of advocating for no build, because it truly is the only option that will protect our water, our wildlife, our agriculture, our rural communities, and our taxpayer investments. So let me give you a little bit of update. Feel free to drop questions into the chat box as you think of them, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. We will make sure that you get all your questions answered and find ways for you to stay engaged in this. So this week was round 7 of the task force meetings. These were held virtually, as well as having a couple in-person locations that community members could attend to watch the proceedings from DOT. These were through GoToMeetings. So again, there was really no opportunity for the public, except for at 5 o'clock, to have any discussion with the task force members or DOT. But there was a fairly robust discussion at each of the meetings this week. So we started the week on Tuesday discussing the Southwest Central Corridor. Again, that's about 140 miles. That would go from Collier, so Naples area, up to Polk County. Really, really extensive discussion there. Tuesday was the Northern Turnpike, which is a 4-county area in the center of the state. And then Thursday was the Suncoast Connector, which goes from Citrus County all the way into potentially into Georgia. So the focus of these meetings really has been on developing the final report that is due to DOT, to the governor, and to the legislature on November 15th. So that's only about 2.5 months away. So that deadline is fast approaching. DOT has been working with the task force members to develop guiding principles and other considerations for the final report. What I stated in public comments and what we've been discussing the entire time is that the whole foundation for this MCORE's project really is not solid. As you know, as nice as a final report is that they develop, if your foundation is not solid, that any of the work products that you come out with are not going to be solid either. So we know that the MCORE's process first was a political pet project from our Senate President Bill Galvano. This is not the way DOT planning processes typically work, where it's typically comes from the local communities and groups like metropolitan planning organizations or regional planning councils that have had thorough discussion with their community members and understand what the needs are. Of course, this was a very top-down process that came with the legislation, SB 7068 in 2019. So this is not the way good planning processes proceed, and DOT has been working to try and build out this foundation of the MCOREs and the final report on something where we still do not see any need or the financial viability for it. So keeping comments very high level until DOT can prove that we need potentially 330 new miles of toll roads and that we have the money to invest in those, we should not be proceeding with this project. And I asked task force members to not sign on to a consensus report, which is the way this final report is envisioned, to not sign on to that unless it includes a no build option, because that really is the only option that will protect our natural resources and not further degrade our water, imperil our species like the Florida panther, or make us even more vulnerable to climate change. So DOT throughout the meetings really was pretty forthright about some of the economic realities of this project. They mentioned that this project is unlikely to go forward in its entirety because the funding will be constrained. As we know, the MCORE's budget has been pretty insulated when we look at the state budget overall. This year, the MCORE's budget was supposed to be $90 million. It ballooned up to $117 million by some of the funding for things like the Transportation Disadvantage Fund or the Small County Road Assistance Program, some of those monies rolling into the MCORE's project. So while we lost more than $90 million for local transportation infrastructure projects and water quality improvements, the MCORE's budget not only was secure, but it actually increased this year. So that is a concern for all of us. What DOT acknowledged is that if the full MCORE's project cannot go through, as we know, construction is supposed to start in 2022. It's supposed to be finished by 2030. So that is less than 10 years from now, which is lightning speed when it comes to an infrastructure project of this magnitude. DOT acknowledged that they may not have the money from construction bonds or other sources to pay for all of these roads. So there will be the need to look at other funding sources. What does that mean? That means that they may be taking money from the Transportation Trust Fund. That may be that they're looking at money from the Turnpike Enterprise System, and they may be looking at how this is incorporated into their 5-year work plan so that portions of these roads may be on par with other projects that are happening throughout the state. So what does that mean for you and I? Well, first of all, it shows that this project has an enormous price tag on it. Estimates from both Florida Tax Watch and some work done by Thousand Friends and the Sierra Club have put a price tag between $25 and $30 billion on this full project. So that is a significant amount of money, especially while our state is still grappling with this global health and economic pandemic. So if DOT cannot afford these roads through transportation bonds, construction bonds, and they do have to look at other sources, what that means is that toll users in other parts of the state, in Central Florida, in Orlando, in South Florida, in Miami-Dade, for example, Broward County, those people may be subsidizing a significant portion of that. DOT did not say that they were going to ask local communities to help foot a portion of the bill, but they did not say that they would pay for all of it themselves either. Local county commissioners who are members of the task force, that's definitely something that you could hear them raising the hairs on their backs because they've been sold this bill of goods that these roads, if we let these roads come through your communities, we're going to help to revitalize your economies. We're going to bring you broadband. We're going to bring you sewer. We're going to bring you all these things to bring you up to par with some of the other areas of the state that have some more financial resources. And I think it's becoming very apparent that there is unlikely to be the money, first of all, to build these roads. And if you can't build all the roads and you're lumping this in with some of these other projects that already have demonstrated need, what is the likelihood that some of these are going to get done and that some of these aspirational goals like bringing broadband and sewer to the local communities, is that realistic? And I think people within the MCORE's communities need to be very aware of that, because we know that the development on its own does not pay for itself, and that anytime you build new communities and have strains on our water resources that requires new infrastructure, you're really shifting a lot of that burden to existing communities. And these roads are demonstrating already that they will not pay for themselves. We know that the ridership in some of these areas is already very low in portions of the Suncoast connector area and northern portions. US 19 is about 20% capacity. So the idea of putting a new road in there just seems a little bit ridiculous, and not where we should be putting our investments. But I do see a shift of DOT looking at more upgrades and working within some of the existing road corridors, and maybe doing a piecemeal approach where they're upgrading some sections, maybe putting in portions of toll roads. But I think it's very unlikely that we will have 330 new miles of roads. That is good for the state, but there's still not the need for some of these new infrastructure projects while we have so many unmet needs, both for transportation, water quality, and really protecting our communities. So there was that discussion about the economics. There was an expert who talked about hurricane evacuation, and that's a very cogent topic right now as we saw Hurricane Laura move into the Gulf Coast and impact Louisiana and Texas. Of course, we want to make sure that people in our community are being safe. What's important to note, and something that several of the commissioners and elected officials mentioned, Pat Steed, who's at the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, as well as Commissioner Christian Dozier, who's a Leon County Commissioner, sits on the board of the Capital Region Transportation Planning Agency in the greater Tallahassee, Leon County, Jefferson, Wakulla, and I'll come back to the last one, but four counties and the city of Tallahassee. They both mentioned that the state has not conducted a statewide evacuation study for more than 10 years. And that's because that was not a priority of our former governor, Rick Scott. Our current governor, DeSantis, did put money in the budget for it this year. So we're glad that that is going forward. But when you're, when you're building the premise for something this massive and this expensive and this devastating on something where we don't have a current study to back it up, I just think that's not the way we do good planning in this state, and that's a reason why we really need to put the brakes on this toll roads process. Tell DOT and the legislature that that no build is where we need to be, and we need to re-examine this in light of some of our bigger statewide priorities. So those are some things that are important for consideration. A lot of the time was spent on guiding principles, on doing wordsmithing of some of the guiding principles. What's happening is that DOT is essentially drafting this final report and then coming to the task force members for their comment and edits and discussion. It's very difficult for the public to have a direct input on this final report, which is why members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition and conservation voters have been sending comments directly to task force members rather than just to DOT, because we know that those public comments largely have not been shared. DOT has done a better job recently of providing a zip drive to the task force members of those public comments, but it's a significant lift for them to go through and read all the comments. That's why members and volunteers within the No Roads to Ruin have proactively requested the public records and gone through a painstaking process of going through all of those comments and looking at the percentages of people who are for or against these roads, or maybe are still undecided. And our initial examination of more than 1,500 comments showed that about 87.7% of those people were against the roads. So the guiding principles, I think one of the best ways to influence those is comments directly to the task force members, which is what we've been doing as part of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition. As you would imagine, there was significant discussion on the natural resources portion, on our conservation lands, on wildlife habitat, and our water quality, because those are the things that Floridians really are concerned about. And we are still climbing an uphill battle to get the money we need to address things like toxic algae blooms, impairments in our springs and some of our freshwater river systems, part of a much bigger issue of how do we best protect our water resources, make polluters pay, make them accountable, as well as our elected officials and our environmental agencies, making sure that they are keeping the environment top of mind and not bowing to some of the pressures of the development community. So some of the environmental advocates, groups like Everglades Foundation, Thousand Friends of Florida, Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, task force members from there were very forceful in reminding DOT that as part of this MCORE's legislation, they have a need not just to avoid or mitigate for direct impacts from a road, but really to make our state and our natural resources better than they are. When challenged for DOT to put money aside and look at a land acquisition plan specifically to kind of right some of the wrongs that we've done in the past, DOT was very hesitant to commit to something like that. So those type of aspirational goals, whether it's conservation or water infrastructure or broadband, those are what local communities were sold on, and that we were told that this is why this type of project was needed and why it was different. But when push comes to shove, it will be really interesting to see what actually happens, and if DOT is willing to put some of that money into some proactive conservation rather than just trying to mitigate for the damage that may occur. We know that for the Florida Panther, the Southwest Central corridor really could mean extinction for those cats, our state animal. For our water quality, there may have to be significant portions of those areas that are elevated to avoid impacts to the hydrology, essentially the way the water moves through those systems. And we can't, until we fix some of the issues from previous generations, it's really hard to be adding more insult to our natural systems, and that's something that these roads would do. So we will continue to stay vigilant in our engagement in this process. But again, without a no-build option in the final report, we are asking the task force members not to sign on to that, because that is really the only way that we can protect our natural environment. DOT has pushed off a lot of these discussions or the data until they've done the planning, design, and engineering phase, or as they refer to it, PD&E. And we really think that for such a massive project, more analysis needs to be happening at this stage before we commit more of our taxpayer dollars into a project that does not have the support of the local communities. So I feel like it's a way for DOT just kind of to push that down the road, to avoid some of these hard discussions, because they do know that there's not the ridership throughout most of these corridors areas, and there's not the money to pay for these. So again, no build continues to be the way that we will protect the things that we hold dear in our state and make sure that we can keep our Florida taxpayer dollars going to the priorities that we currently have. So let me look at a few questions that we have. Something about when task force members will be free to speak again. So in terms of the schedule, there's going to be 2 more rounds of task force meetings. There's going to be around the week of September 21st. Generally, the meetings have been on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and a Thursday, and then they're looking at another round of meetings the week of October 19th. So that's when the task force members will convene again. Task force members are able to have direct communication with DOT. And during this last round of webinars, I heard many times that task force members would say, I'll send you those comments directly, or DOT would say, we'll follow up with a phone call with you. So there's a lot that's happening that the public does not know about. Direct input into the final report, or questions that the DOT is asking for the task force members. You and I and the public are not able to know what those conversations are. We can see how some of the language in the report and the guiding principles has changed over the time, but we don't know maybe what recommendations the task force members have made that have not been accepted or integrated by DOT. So that is a concern. There is an ability for the task force members to have some dialogue within themselves during these task force meetings, but there is not an opportunity for the public, and really this has never been part of it. The public has never been able to raise their hand and bring something up. That's largely set aside for the public comment period, which have been occurring at the end of a very long day. This week, each of the meetings began at 9 a.m. It went until 5 p.m. The public comment period started at 5 p.m. and we're hopeful that many of the task force members stayed on to hear the voices of the people, but we really don't know for sure if our comments were being heard. So I guess the clarification, when will they be able to talk with us as a group together? So I believe once the task force report is published on November 15th, there will be some opportunity for task force members to have more dialogue outside of these meetings. DOT did talk about the idea of developing an advisory group that would transition and help them move into these other phases of MCOREs, which would include PD&E. It would include looking at right-of-way acquisition. And what was interesting is that DOT is looking at this as a way to have some more accountability when it comes to local communities and to our sensitive environment here in Florida. And some task force members thought that was a really welcome addition to their planning process. Groups like Defenders of Wildlife thought that would be a welcome thing. Some of the local elected officials that have been very pro MCOREs said, nope, we don't think that's a good idea. We've already spent a year giving you guidance. You have everything you need to know. And so that may be a deliberate attempt to let these roads go through without more consideration and more opportunities for public engagement. So it's interesting to see where some members of the task forces, what side of the fence they fall on. So that is just a suggestion by DOT. It's something that I anticipate that they will look at bringing forward. The final report, as we've seen little snippets of it right now, still does not address the need for the roads and the economic feasibility for it. That is a requirement for the task force members to look at the need for the roads. And we feel that hasn't been addressed. DOT is doing it on a very high level, but it needs to be something that has much greater consideration before any task force members should be comfortable signing on to something like that. I did mention that when you're looking to build whether it's a home or a new business, you're not going to build it in a place where it's an eroding coastline or a sinkhole, excuse me. But that the foundation for this whole MCORES program is not solid. And I use the analogy of this process and this final report, like trying to build a McMansion, this gigantic thing on a sinkhole. So you can slap together, the most beautiful home, but if the foundation is not strong and it's not able to stand the test of time, then you're really wasting your resources and you're wasting time for the many people that have been involved. So I know that we will continue to put in the hours, find ways to keep you engaged, and we want to make sure that we are protecting the resources in our state and really doing right by the people in Florida. I'm going to try and drop something in to the chat box here, and this is our petition here. This is what we've called on DOT to put the brakes on this process. We still feel that it's not the most conducive way to receive public comment. The dialogue is limited during these virtual meetings. This is such a big project that we really just need to put the brakes on it. And we're also calling on the legislature to revisit this in 2021 in light of all of the issues that we're facing as a state. We know that people are having their power shut off. Groups like Duke Energy and TECO are starting to turn off utilities for non-payment. You know, people are still struggling with unemployment and the economic devastation that COVID-19 has brought. So, you know, keeping the lights on for people is a bigger consideration than building new toll roads right now. At least that's what we believe. We've been working with partners through something called Connected in Crisis, where we are, you know, really trying to work on behalf of Floridians to make sure that we can keep their power on. So those type of things are critical for us to be putting our investments in and our taxpayer dollars, not these roads to ruin. I just mentioned, I put in a link to a story down in the Naples area that just came out today. Was able to talk with a reporter down there who was knew that the MCORE's meetings were going on and that I'd been, you know, parked in front of my laptop all week listening to him. And he said, can you give me the names of some of the businesses, some people that are supporting this? And I said, gee, Chad, I'd really love to be able to help you with that, but there really isn't any support, you know, besides kind of the normal players, the Trucking Association, Chamber of Commerce. You don't have people coming out strongly in support of these. And that's just in recognition that this is not what Floridians, this is not what community members want. And that's why you're having a hard time finding people in the business community that really want these roads. So I'd encourage you to check out that local story. We did drop the P2 action in there, so we'd appreciate you taking a few minutes, signing your name on there, asking DOT to put the brakes on the process, and for our legislative leaders to revisit this in 2021. So I think that's a pretty good review of where we are. There was a mention about a billionaire that paid DeSantis in the Republican legislature to get this through. Yes, Thomas Petterfee owns some significant portions of land throughout the Suncoast connector study counties. I believe he also owns some land in the Southwest Central area. So there, just like many things, there's going to be a few big winners, and then most ordinary Floridians or Americans are going to be on the losing end of this. So some people may benefit if their lands are purchased by DOT as part of this right-of-way acquisition process. They will be winners, but some of our small farms may be impacted. That has a negative impact on our food security, which is something that we really need to be taking a closer look at, making sure that we have local food that we're able to provide for the needs of people in our communities. Again, the water and just the habitat destruction that will happen from this is something that we should not stand for as a state. Panther experts waiting in the wings. There has been input from groups on Panther habitat. I think it needs to take be stronger in the considerations by DOT during this process, because there's, Panthers used to be throughout the entire southeast part part of our country. And now South Florida is the only place where the panther has any viable habitat. There's been some significant strides to bring the panthers back from, having, maybe 20, a couple dozen panthers in the state. Now the numbers are closer to 200, and we've actually seen documentation of female panthers crossing the Caloosahatchee River in South Florida, which was kind of seen as this, this dividing line. And if we could get the female panthers north of the river, they may be able to expand their habitat range. That has happened. There's been some kittens that have been born in that area. But if we put a massive road through their habitat and fragment that further, that could seriously undo a lot of the good work that conservationists and scientists have done over the past several decades. So, we really have to make some of these decisions about whether we're willing to sacrifice our iconic state animal for some more asphalt, for some roads. And I would say that we should never make that. We should never say that roads are more important than our wildlife. All right, let me just look through and see if any other questions. Sewage problems at municipal plants should be a higher priority. Certainly, Debbie, we have water quality needs throughout our state, whether it's getting areas off of septic and onto sewer or repairing some of our aging infrastructure. We have billions of dollars of water quality infrastructure needs that really should take precedence over new roads through some of our best remaining natural and agricultural areas. So thank you for that comment. So we will be back at it, continuing to keep you engaged in this fight. Please share these resources with people in your community and throughout the state. One thing that we're finding is that even though you and I may be very connected to this issue, there's still a lot of Floridians that don't know about this. The Capital Region Transportation Planning Agency, which I referenced earlier, 4-county area around in the Tallahassee area, they had a discussion about 2 weeks ago at their board meeting. One of the commissioners, Commissioner Kristen Dozier, asked to have an update on MCOREs at that meeting. And it was pretty striking that many of the board members there did not have a strong familiarity with this project. And they've been working diligently on planning exercises and working through their work plans, doing things the way they're supposed to be. And here's this massive project that could suck some of the money out of planning and infrastructure needs in other parts of the state. So making sure that people in your communities know about this, because even if this road won't directly impact you in your county, it will hit you in your wallet. That's going to hurt. It will have an impact on our water and the other things that we hold dear. Some places have been proactive in passing no-build resolutions, and I'll mention that Alachua County, which contains the city of Gainesville, it's just several weeks ago, unanimously passed a no-build resolution at their county commission level that was brought forward by some of our allies at Save Our Santa Fe River, some groups like that. I know some of our friends at Center for Biological Diversity and Sierra Club were really instrumental in that. So we appreciate some of those local efforts that may help to turn the tide and really get the public engaged in this. The green arrow north of Immokalee has gotten some concern within Henry County. Someone has mentioned. I will point out that the Coalition of Immokalee Workers is a member of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, which has, I think we're up to about 95 businesses and organizations that have opposed the toll roads. So that's a community that is, worried about what will happen to some of the agricultural areas if these roads bypass some of these local communities. It could be very detrimental to the local businesses. On the other side, if roads go directly through them, it could change the entire character and lead to additional urban sprawl. So local communities such as Immokalee do have reason to be concerned, and hope that they stay engaged in this. It's not going to end on November 15th. We'll be looking at how this final report is utilized and ways that we can continue to push no build as the only viable option for our state, and make sure that our resources and that our attention goes to protecting our water, our wildlife, our agriculture, our rural communities, and our taxpayers. So with that, I'm going to sign off for this Friday afternoon. This video will be available on our Florida Conservation Voters Facebook site. Feel free to share it and stay in touch with us through our social media outlets, and we'll chat with you all soon. Thank you so much.